Good morning, folks. Thank you very much for tuning into the news at Ben. I hope you all had a brilliant week. Now, today I want to talk about the Rupert Lowe, Nigel Farage bust up. I want to talk about it not because of the nitty-gritty political theatre of the dispute, but because of the importance of what it means, what that dispute means. Now, many of you, perhaps all of you, watching, if you were of age at the time, voted to leave the European Union. And what you were effectively voting for in 2016 was to return power to this country and hope that our politicians would make policies for the betterment of the United Kingdom and for its people. That is what essentially the vote to leave the EU was. And we've had successive governments that have failed to do it. Boris Johnson, I think, arguably was one of the worst prime ministers ever. Not only did he fail to get Brexit done, but he took down our borders, mass immigration, including mass illegal migration into the country, locked us up at home, destroyed the economy, stripped us of our civil liberties, etc., etc., etc. Took the nanny state and made it into a wet nurse. And our hopes, therefore, rested on Reform UK. Reform UK came into rapid existence, into the people's psyche, really within a period of a year and a half, before Nigel joined the party, by the way. It came into the people's psyche because we were desperate to find a champion that would reverse all the damage done by people like Boris Johnson and actually eventually deliver independence to the United Kingdom so that those that govern us would start doing what's right for us. And we hoped that Reform UK would be that vehicle. Now, I've known for a while that Nigel is not the man. It's very difficult for an individual to say that because he's such a massive persona on the political stage, and he has cast himself as this man who absolutely believes in the United Kingdom. He is Mr. Brexit. He is the one without whom we wouldn't have left the EU, etc., etc. But the reality is, and I have to be blunt about this, at every opportunity that he's had to save this country, he has dropped the ball. The first time he dropped the ball was after the vote to leave the EU in 2016 itself. Instead of staying on the political battlefield, he disappeared off thinking Theresa May would get it done. Then he came back with the Brexit Party, which is when I got involved in politics. And again, big fanfare, big results. We were the largest political party in the European Parliament. Got rid of Theresa May, got Boris Johnson in, and then we stepped down. Nigel Farage stepped down against Boris Johnson, put him into office, and the excuse given was that if we didn't do that, we'd get a Jeremy Corbyn-led government, a second referendum, and that would be the end of Brexit. And I kind of buy that, by the way. I get it. I understand why that might have been important. But we all knew the withdrawal agreement was rubbish, and we all knew Boris Johnson was a charlatan. So it was absolutely vital that Nigel stood on the battlefield and fought to get Brexit through. Instead, Nigel said Brexit is done. He still says Brexit done, but it's not. And to say it's done is to fundamentally misunderstand the current position of the United Kingdom and therefore make it virtually impossible, in my view, to chart a path that's going to see the UK right. Because if you don't understand the predicament in which you're in, you can't chart a proper path. And Rupert will remember this. Rupert Lowe, Robert Rowland and myself took Nigel out for dinner in, I think, August 2020. And we beseeched him to stay on the political battlefield. At the time, the trade agreement with the EU was being written. And it was vital that that trade agreement unpick some of the things in the withdrawal agreement so that we could get a genuine Brexit. And Nigel absolutely turned on me at supper. And he said, well, it's fine for you, Ben. You were born with a silver spoon up your backside. But I've devoted the last 20 years to trying to get Brexit done. And I am now off. And he went off to do GB News and whatever else it was that he did. And that was a blow to me, a personal blow, but it was a blow to the nation too, because it was left to lesser voices like me and others fighting for a proper leaving of the EU, which, as I'm sure you know, is crucial for the United Kingdom to be able to chart the path that we need to chart. And I brought my case for the Northern Ireland against the Northern Ireland Protocol, and Nigel did not support me in that case. He didn't make any public appeals to fund the case. He didn't get on GB News and say how vitally important it is that Ben wins the case. He sees Northern Ireland as an incidental part of the United Kingdom. But it's not an incidental part. It is part of the UK. No part of the UK can be an incidental part of the UK. It is a crucial component. If you don't understand the democratic union for which you're fighting, you're incapable, again, of rescuing the UK. There are over 1 million British citizens in Northern Ireland. No way in a million years would a half-decent leader throw them under a bus. But Nigel went on, he didn't just fail to support me in my fight against the protocol. He went on to say in September 2023 that a united Ireland was inevitable. And he even told me before I joined Reform that he would support the Democratic Unionist Party of Northern Ireland, even if it did the dirty on Northern Ireland. He would support them because he's mates with Sammy Wilson, Ian Paisley and others. And when Richard invited me to join Reform, I said I absolutely would not do it because of the position Nigel had taken on Northern Ireland, the position Nigel had taken on Brexit, saying it was done when it wasn't done, the refusal of Nigel to give up his shares in the private limited company so that we couldn't have any proper checks and balances, processes, etc. in the party. And then there were some monetary issues, actually, as well, with the Brexit party that had got my attention. I'm not going to go into details of them, but there was some money moving around, which did concern me and still concerns me about the way the Brexit party was funded and the motives of some of the people who funded it. And I'm going to leave that there. But I wrote an email to Richard Tice on the 16th of March 2023, declining to join Reform and setting out these reasons that I've just given you. And so I knew Nigel was a problem. In the end, I joined Reform because I got a letter from Richard that promised to run the party consensually, promised not to do any deals with the Tories, and to fight for Brexit and for Northern Ireland and the Union of Great Britain with Northern Ireland. And I'd also made the calculation, the wrong calculation, that Nigel wouldn't come back into politics, that he was more wed to making money. That was a crucial mistake that I made. If I'd known he was coming back, believe me, I would not have joined Reform UK. And Nigel and I, the split between Nigel and me actually goes back to that time because he was aware of my comments about some of the money that Brexit Party had raised and my qualms about it. And he was aware that I didn't agree with him on Brexit being done, the approach to Northern Ireland, etc. And there was a kind of rift between Nigel and me at that point. I'm an ideologue. And I realised then that actually Nigel is a political expedient. And there is no room in the United Kingdom, if it is to be rescued, for any more political expediency. We need ideologues who are prepared to take the high road and the right road, saying and doing the right things for this country if it is to be rescued. And by the way, I think as many of you know, it is now a matter of actually saving the UK from its very end. That is how far things have got. And so when Nigel came back as leader, by the way, something he did without any consultation with me, I didn't know he was coming back. I wasn't informed about it. I learned about it at the press conference. And I haven't spoken to Nigel once. Not once have I spoken to Nigel since he came back as leader. And remember, I was deputy leader of the party when he appointed himself leader. And during the general election, even though I texted him many times, imploring him to come to Wellingborough and to work with me during the general election campaign, I got no traction with him whatsoever. It was no surprise to me that he sacked me as deputy leader coming out of that general election. What did surprise me was that his claim that he would democratise the party, and I was watching that carefully, and I think the declaration that he made to democratise the party was effectively done to sideline my banging of that drum, because when he came back on the 3rd of June, I knew immediately the only hope that Reform would have of succeeding was if we could now force a democratisation, force checks and balances into place, so that Nigel as leader could be held in some sort of control while other people in the party did what was needed in order for Reform UK to become the party that could rescue us. But Nigel and Zia Youssef have lied about the democratisation of the party. It's just a lie. They haven't democratised it. It is still controlled by Nigel and now Zia Youssef. And that brings me tangentially on to Zia Youssef. Momentarily, I'm going to talk about him. It is extraordinary that this man, who had no political footprint, made his first speech for Reform UK on the 30th of June, was appointed chairman on the 11th of July, 11 days later. That is unprecedented in political history. And that means there's something about the relationship between Nigel and him that we're not aware of. And if we're not aware of it, it cannot be a good reason that there's some sort of hidden deal between Zia Youssef and Nigel Farage. Anyway, I went on banging the drum for democratisation, and Nigel progressively tried to rubbish me. And during that period, since I was sacked July through to sort of nowish, throughout that period, people like me in the party, people who share my views, who share the importance of actually rescuing the UK and doing absolutely what's critically right for the UK now, they have in many of them have been set aside, either forced to resign or been sacked, and often with attacks on their reputations at the same time. Zia Youssef and Nigel have basically set themselves on destroying the movement that existed when Nigel took over. Sure, they've set up branches, but they've tried to parachute in their own people and remove those ideologues who I think get in the way of their political expediency. And we've also seen Nigel, so he's refused to democratise it. It's the Nigel Farage, Zia Youssef dog and pony show. And he's also, in his rhetoric, and I'm sure this is not in order purely to get into office and then he's going to be all things to all pro-unionist, pro-Brexit voters, he has diluted down his message dramatically. So he's, I think all of you now will be aware, he's on the record saying that he's not against mass, the rapid change in our demography. He's not in favour of mass deportation of illegal migrants. He doesn't want to politically alienate Islam. I don't actually know what the hell that means. But he is, and just to remind people, he's said again and again, Brexit's done, it hasn't been done, and that a united Ireland is inevitable. He's also put forward Remainers like Charlie Mullins as candidates, taken on Nick Candy, who counts Tony Blair and Peter Mandelson as great people with whom he is friends. He has, and taken on Liberal Democrats too in the party. So the point I'm trying to make is that Reform UK is not the answer to our hopes. Nigel Farage is not the man that you think he is. I even doubt that he's a Brexiteer. I think that was a convenient political whipping horse for him to get the political attention he craved in order to make himself into the persona that he now is. It is therefore vital, it is therefore vital to reveal him for what he is. And that's what the Rupert Lowe dispute has done. It has revealed to the world what Nigel Farage is. And that is, as I say, I hope I'm not repeating myself too much, that is crucial. Because without realising that, without understanding that Reform UK is not the hope that we all had expected of it, it's not the hope for the United Kingdom, without realising that, we won't be able to deliver for the UK that which is needed. And that delivery from the precipice would appear not to be coming from the Conservative Party either. So something dramatic needs to take place in British politics. What the Rupert Lowe, Nigel Farage dispute reveals is something dramatic in British politics needs to take place if this country is to be saved from a second term of Labour and the continued destruction of the country at the hands of Keir Starmer and, frankly, people like Nigel Farage and others. That's the message. The charges made against Rupert Lowe were trumped up. The criticisms made of me of being bitter and twisted, etc., were trumped up. The charges made against dozens and dozens, hundreds of grassroots supporters of reform in order to remove them from the party are trumped up. Nigel Farage is just a performer. He is not the leader that is going to save this country. Rupert Lowe carries that torch now. He carries that torch because of a number of things. He stood firm in his position. He would not budge. And he's had the courage to fight Nigel when Nigel has tried to rubbish him. And of course, he's an MP, a brave MP, a fantastic MP. So around Rupert, something has to emerge over the next few weeks and months. And it is to that endeavour that we must all commit ourselves. I'm going to come back to this subject a few times over the next few weeks, but it is of vital importance that we understand Nigel Farage ain't the man, Reform UK ain't the man. It doesn't matter how well they're doing in the polls, they will not deliver the country to safety. They will be part of the problem, they are not the solution. The solution is coming. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.